welcome to the Unprofessionals Podcast. My name is Joshua Sutter, and I am joined by Nathan Page. It is 12 a.m. Eastern Coast time, or East time, or whatever, Eastern Pacific, I don't know how you say it, but it is midnight. Game 5 of the Oklahoma City Thunder versus Golden State Warriors series is finally over, and yeah, it was an absolutely unbelievable game, and we couldn't really wait till the morning to do a podcast because we both just had so many thoughts on it. So Nathan, first off, how are you doing?
I am very good. Yeah, we were just texting about it, and I was so hyped after that game and thinking about doing this podcast we talked about doing in the morning. I don't think we could have waited. I would have just been staying up thinking about it. So by far the best game of the conference finals, I would say, on either side so far.
Totally agree with you. So just first off the bat, what were your... Well, I guess let's not really do initial thoughts. Let's just dive right in. I think the biggest takeaway, at least from my perspective, was obviously Steph Curry played a lot better, but it wasn't even it wasn't even the shooting. It was the way he was getting to the basket. It was like vintage Steph Curry as far as the way he was taking people off the dribble and finishing at the basket without really, too many. I mean, he had some floaters, but he was doing his reverse layups and he was doing everything, and he was able to avoid the contact in some circumstances. And when he wasn't avoiding the contact, he was taking the contact and he was still making shots. So I think that was probably the biggest takeaway for me, was that if the Warriors had won this game and Curry didn't look like he could take over, at least, his shot wasn't great tonight, but it was better. But at least he was able to take over driving to the bucket, and that's something we hadn't seen yet in the series.
Yeah, Steph was definitely impressive, especially down the stretch. You could just see he was deciding we're not going to lose this game. And he wasn't just doing the standard step back three, like crossover behind the back, step back on a big man. He was driving past Ibaka. He was driving past Russ, driving past KD, driving past Adams. He literally drove past their entire team down in the fourth quarter. I think every defender that had him, he drove past. And he missed some layups, but he finished when it mattered, and he got fouled when it mattered. It was really impressive. But I thought one interesting adjustment the Warriors made was something where it looked like they were running the offense through Bogut, especially in the first half. Whenever he was in the game, they were running it through him. I think that's a really interesting adjustment, just because you're attacking right at the big man. And that's been something. The rim protection for the Thunder has obviously been great. And you're kind of freeing up Draymond and Steph to work off the ball. They were posting up Draymond on the wing some. So I kind of like how they had changed the way they were running the offense, because nothing was working before. Like, other people on other podcasts have talked about it enough, but the Draymond Steph pick and roll, which has been deadly all year, just hasn't worked. So it was cool to see the Warriors do something a little bit different. They've done it before against other teams, and it's not that weird, I guess. But it was an adjustment that paid off, I guess, this game. I don't know if they'll do it again or if it'll work again, but it certainly worked this game. And Bogut, I mean, he played really well. He had a huge impact on this game. He didn't have put up huge numbers or anything, but the way that he helped the offense flow was big.
You mentioned Draymond Green and the whole pick and roll thing, and it still felt like it wasn't working. But one of the things earlier in the game was, Marv Albert was freaking out, and Twitter was freaking out about, intense Draymond is back. Like, this is great. And Draymond did play a little bit better, but it felt like every time that he had the ball in his hands and was in a playmaking opportunity, whether he was pushing it and it felt like bad things were happening, or he was on the post. And there were multiple times where on the switch, Westbrook would be guarding him, and he did make a couple of good passes in those situations, but there were probably 3 or 4 times where Russ was on his back and he was isolated on, one block or the other, and he wouldn't take him on. It was really weird. And I get he was like being alpha dog Draymond from a perspective of, yeah, he was barking when he got a block and all that stuff, but it still feels like he's crazy at a disadvantage in terms of what he normally can do on the offensive end as, both a ball handler on the wing and also in the post, because it almost feels like his confidence is shot, because for him to not for him to not at least try to take Russ down, it just seemed like it was this weird, like, they're not in his head, but at the same time, it feels like his offensive game has decreased to where he can really only feel confident taking close shots, because it didn't feel like he was taking a ton of threes. And because this is, 20 minutes after the game ended or whatever, I don't really know how many threes he took, but it felt like he was pretty much shot from an offensive perspective.
I agree with that too. I think, I don't know, I find myself as I'm watching basketball more and more and paying attention to the way I watch basketball, if that makes sense. I think I pay attention a lot more to the vibe of the game or the vibe of players and the feeling you get just from watching them. And it seemed like offensively, especially for Russ or for Steph and Draymond, they weren't themselves still. Like they were getting there a little bit, but Steph started to show later part of the fourth quarter, he's back. He really asserted himself. And I think the thing that was missing for me was a sense of urgency. Like the last two games before game 5, game 3 and 4, obviously, there just wasn't a sense of urgency to me. It seemed like they were still careless with the ball. They were still, and this is something I saw in the regular season, and we never talked about it because they were playing so well, but it's something that didn't occur to me until now. You just see how careless they are with the ball, even in games where you have to score in this moment, and they still make lazy passes or dangerous passes or unnecessarily fancy passes and throw the ball away. So it seemed like that was still the case until later in the game when Steph just decided, I'm getting to the basket and no one's going to stop me. But I think you're right. I think Draymond still seems like not quite himself offensively. Defensively, he was the best he's been all series, but offensively, it almost feels like being a tweener, which is, what everybody would have called him before small ball started to explode with him at the center. He is this kind of in-between player of, is he a 3 or 4? In the old NBA, that's the way it would have been. And now it seems like that's kind of manifesting itself in this series against a team where they have a superstar who can play 3 or 4, who's almost 7 feet tall, and Kevin Durant, and can shoot the lights out and can handle the ball and can defend. Like, he seems like the perfect small ball player because of who he is. And it's almost like having someone like that exposes that Draymond isn't as skilled as Durant. He's not as athletic as Durant. But defensively, this game, he stepped up. But I agree with you. I think offensively, he has a lot of trouble against – I think he spends so much energy keeping Adams off the boards. And I think Ibaka is athletic enough to hang with him to an extent. And I don't know. I'm anxious to see what happens in Game 6 as far as, does he bring that aggressiveness? Is he more confident offensively? Because it seems like he's not willing to pull the trigger on threes like he used to be. I don't know. I don't know if somebody's in his head, or if it's just going to take time to get that confidence back, or if, quite honestly, he just is being exposed by a bigger front line with the Thunder. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think it is something the Thunder are doing where they're in his head, or is it just a matter of he's not as good as the Thunder's front line?
In the first few games, I didn't really think it was something to where they were getting in his head. I just thought that the Thunder were just playing so big and such good defense, whether it was, especially Steven Adams, but also Andre Roberson, like he was playing really well. And I think the biggest takeaway from Game 5 for me was the rebounding, because in the first few games of the series and in the regular season, the Thunder were able to dominate on both the offensive glass and just in the glass in general. And, this game it was 45-45. And the other surprising stat was the fast break points, where I don't have the numbers in front of me as far as what they were at the end of the game, but I know throughout the game, the Thunder were just getting dominated as far as fast break points and on the rebounding side. And that was something that wasn't the case in the first few games. And yet, the weirdest thing about all of this is that it still felt like the Thunder, and it didn't just feel like they had a real shot to win at the end of the game. And I'm not sure how I felt about the way Donovan coached the game. I think he did a really poor job as far as Durant's minutes in the first half, as far as just my eye test, and I wasn't really tracking numbers or anything. But Durant ended up only playing 44 minutes. Russ played 40. So even though it felt like Durant was in there the entire game, he did get a few minutes rest here and there. But it was weird watching them, the way they were trying to convert on the offensive end in the last couple of minutes, because I get it. Durant had gotten kind of hot, even though he finished 3 out of 11 from 3-point range and 12 out of 31 overall. 40 points. You can't really argue with that because he was 13 from 13 for the line. But it wasn't the team, and I feel so stupid saying like team style of basketball, but the Thunder's offense really felt fluid the first few games. And granted, most of it does run through Durant and Westbrook. But this game, it did feel like a bit of a weird, crappy game because they shot 42% overall for the entire team, but Westbrook was 11 out of 28 and Durant was 12 out of 31, and yet they were still in it at the very end. And a Steph Curry turnover and they're down by 5 with 40 seconds to go or whatever, and it was almost a weird, crazy comeback. But it was still one of those games to where it was like the better team felt like the Thunder, and they were playing bad, but yet they were still in it the entire game, despite the Warriors seemingly playing better. Steph had 30, or playing like way better than the Thunder were. Steph had 31. Clay had 27. They still weren't great from the 3-point range. As a team, they only shot 37%, but it still felt throughout the entire game like if you were just watching these two teams and had no idea about them, that the Thunder were the better team. They were just having the off night, and yet they still had a shot to win throughout the entire game.
Yeah, I definitely, that was a thought in my head too, was this is very interesting. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing if you're looking from the Warriors perspective, because, and we'll talk about, you mentioned some things about Billy Donovan we can touch on in a minute, but I did think that was interesting that the Thunder really still felt like the more aggressive team. They still felt like there was a moment where I think it was probably 4 minutes left in the game, and they were only down 8. And in my mind, the thought came across, and this had never happened all season with the Warriors. And the thought came across my mind, the Thunder are going to win this game. And it was a little bit weird to think like that, because they felt like the aggressors, even when things were going the Warriors' way, even the calls were going the Warriors' way, everything was going for the Warriors at home in a back against the wall kind of game. I felt more confident in the Thunder's ability to close than the Warriors. So I get what you're saying, because it was almost the vibe of the game was that the Thunder were still confident despite not playing their best game, and they felt like the aggressors, even though they really were being bested by the Warriors offensively. So an interesting game, kind of weird. It felt like, I don't know that we really learned anything other than, okay, the Bogut adjustment was good. The Warriors obviously play good at home. But, man, I hate to say this because I haven't thought this in a while, but it feels like I wouldn't be surprised if the Warriors lost by 15 next game. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I'm with you, because even though the Warriors won this game and it was a huge, the crowd was going crazy, it was, and I mean, it should definitely be that way. Like their backs were against the wall or whatever, and they played a somewhat decent game and were able to fend off a team that had dominated them in 3 out of the 4 games so far in the series. But like you said, it felt like the Thunder, even though they lost, and you could argue they had a really good chance to win at the end of the game and just didn't execute. But even though all of that happened, it still feels like they've set themselves up both emotionally as a team and with the way they were playing to come out and win Game 6, because obviously, I'm not breaking any, barriers by saying like if they lose Game 6, then they're really they're kind of screwed, because it's to lose 2 in a row, lose at home, and then have to go back to Golden State for a Game 7. Not that they couldn't win, but that's something you don't want to happen. So I think they set themselves up really well to win Game 6, because even though the Warriors did make the adjustments, you mentioned the Bogut thing. They played more minutes with, Mo Spates. He played 8 minutes in a really good game. Festus only played 3, but it still felt like the size that they had figured out, and they played a little bit more of a balanced lineup with, Iguodala getting 34 minutes and Livingston getting 14. It felt like it was a more balanced, heavy dosage of height, and it obviously worked, because they got 45 rebounds and equaled the Thunder total of 45 rebounds. So even though the Warriors made those adjustments and played big, I still think that Durant and Westbrook, for all the points they had, didn't play well. 12 out of 31 and 11 out of 28. That's not good, obviously. And so if I had to make a pick, I would have to say the Thunder, because if the Warriors were going to come back in this game and, prove to us all that, games 1 through 4 was a fluke, like this wasn't the game. Like I didn't feel that way at all. It still felt like games, 1, 3, and 4 that the Thunder won. It felt like they were legit, that they were real, and that I don't really see anything changing as far as I still feel like the Thunder have somehow asserted themselves as the better team. Even with Steph's mini little resurgence in this game, it still feels like the Thunder are a better team and should win the series.
Yeah, as much as, because we put out obviously the Game 4 diary of you and I kind of going back and forth. I think we both are itching to see history, and I think me more than you. Not that I'm not a fan. I don't have a dog in this fight by any means, but I do want to see the Warriors win for the sake of history. I appreciate the greatness that they've shown. And most of all, I think the reason I want them to win is because people are going to use any loss by the Warriors as an indictment on the way that they play and the way that they won last year. And that to me is so short-sighted and ignorant to do. But that's why I think I'm pulling for them. But I agree with you. I mean, it feels like the Thunder should win this series. The only thing that's keeping me confident that the Warriors could win is the way that Steph played, the defensive tenacity that Draymond showed. Even though offensively he's not all the way there, if you have Clay and Steph playing the way they played tonight, you can win a game. And I think I like that they took Ezeli out. He has been such a liability offensively for them. He can't catch the ball, and there's all these arms flying around him. When you've got Ibaka and Adams just reaching for the ball, Ezeli is not the guy I want catching the ball in the post. So I think it was smart to go away from him, give it to more skilled guys like Bogut and Spates. So I like what they did there, the adjustments. And now I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how they respond on the road. If Draymond can put together kind of a triple-double vintage Draymond game, and, we can have Russ make some mistakes, Steph go for 40. I could see them winning. But I did want to kind of touch on a couple things. We've joked about, some of the things that we've heard other hot take spokespeople talk about with the NBA. But, I mean, you even talked about the rebounding differential. The first 2 games, the Warriors out-rebounded the Thunder. And that's the things people don't talk about. People are acting like, obviously in games 3 and 4, the Warriors were just completely outmuscled. They were blown out. We haven't seen that from them all season. We've seen them get blown out, but never twice in a row. And never did we look at them and think they can't win the next game. So I get it from that perspective. But from a larger narrative, I'm a little bit frustrated that it's changing so quickly. And this is what my whole article was about last week, was just, or 2 weeks ago maybe. It was about just overreaction and how quick we are to do it. And I don't know if it's the time we're living in or just the NBA in general, but it seems like everybody is so quick to want to dispatch what the Warriors have done, when in my mind, what the Thunder Warriors series is telling us isn't so much, okay, this is an indictment on the Warriors. This is an indictment on small ball. This means threes are not really the key to the future of the NBA. I don't think that's what this series is telling us at all. I think what this series is telling us is Draymond and Steph aren't playing like themselves. And when Russ and KD are playing at their best, and when the Thunder lock in on defense, they're one of the 3 best teams in the NBA. And those are things that we already knew. When Steph and Draymond aren't playing well, the Warriors are not going to win. And when the Thunder lock in on defense, they are an elite team. And so I think that's the things that this is showing us. And I was just curious for you. I mean, all these people seem to be so quick to I guess, say, okay, the Warriors are not for real. The way that they're playing is a sham. It's a fluke. It's not real. What do you think about that? Do you think that we're seeing some truths behind that, or is this just our natural reaction to quickly jump to that? When, like I said, the Warriors have out-rebounded, or at least tied in rebounds, 3 of the 5 games so far in the series. So we can't act like they're being out-rebounded every night.
When you say the narrative and all the small ball stuff, are you basically talking about Cowherd?
I didn't want to mention names, but yeah, I mean, it's him. It's I think that, he had somebody call in even who was talking about, the Warriors aren't a real basketball team. And I think it's just so easy to hop on a microphone right now and to just say, Steph's intimidated by Russ. He's a terrible defender. He can't guard Russ, which, by the way, he played Russ really well tonight. He's actually guarded him pretty well for someone who usually doesn't guard the best player on the other team. He's done all right whenever he's been on him. And so for me, I don't know. I think it's just easy for people after 2 losses by the Warriors to all of a sudden come out of the woodwork and say, this isn't real. They're not doing well, or this isn't what I want to see in basketball. The 3 ball isn't the best way to win, whatever. Cowherd is one of the people who've said that. And to me, it's frustrating for that to be the case when I don't think that's really the narrative that we should be talking about, from the series.
I'm totally with you, because one of his things, and I texted you about this, but one of the things that, and I don't like talking about, sports media people and, basically just making I don't know, whatever. I think it's annoying when people talk a ton about what other people have said, because it's just like a stupid loop, but I'm going to anyways. So he basically, he said one of the things was when Steph isn't making threes, he can't really do much, can he, or something along those lines. And tonight was a perfect example of, Steph was 3 out of 8 from threes, which isn't awful, but it's not Steph Curry. And he still had 31 points, 5 steals. His turnovers he still had 5 turnovers, but it was an alpha dog game, and that term is overused a lot, but he really took over in the last few minutes of that game, with especially the steal on Durant when he was guarding him, and there was a block on Durant when he was guarding him, and there were all these little things that Steph was doing that weren't being impacted by him chucking up threes and making the ridiculous shots he usually makes, which, by the way, when you do that for 2 seasons, it's not a fluke anymore. So I think that's kind of for those, for people who take the opinion of, a jump shooting team can't win it and last year was a fluke and all that stuff, it's stupid. 73 wins isn't a fluke. And even if they don't win the title, being down 3-2, they obviously have a better shot than they did before tonight. But even if they don't win the title, nothing they have done is a fluke. Steph isn't a fluke. You don't do what he's done and have it be a fluke, even if you have a few bad games, which who knows it? Only he knows, how his body feels and how hurt he is or whatever. So, we can't really dissect that too much. We can just dissect what we see and how he's actually playing. And he hasn't played amazing this series, yet he still had 2 games to where he's basically the sole reason that the Warriors have 2 wins in this series. And besides that, he's played and he's done all that without an amazing 3-point shot. So I think that whole thing is stupid, and I don't really think it's it's not worth discussing. And Cowherd he makes some really good points and stuff. He has some really great perspectives, but I just didn't get that. I thought it was stupid.
Yeah, I agree. And I've been listening to him, like I joked with you, to kind of hone my NBA apologetics almost, because, that is a joke, obviously, but because he just says so many ignorant things that it's so obvious he's talking about the NBA playoffs and he's watching it, and the dude has watched so much more sports and so many more basketball games than I have. So I can't say he's ignorant completely about basketball, but I think he is ignorant about this season, this team, this matchup. And his whole thing this season, ever since Steph won unanimous MVP, was Steph didn't deserve to be the first unanimous MVP, that technically LeBron is a more valuable player to his team, yada, yada, yada. And he keeps making the Warriors boil down to being this 3-point shooting team, when there's so much more to what they are as a team. And a lot of that flows from Steph, because he's so much more than just a 3-point shooter. And to me, if you see him as just a 3-point shooter, you're missing out on what he is as a player. Because, and I was actually talking with a friend of ours about this, about why he's a better player than Russ, because he was saying, I would take Russ over him right now, which is, by the way, a very convenient thing to say when the Warriors are down 3-1 to the Thunder. because 2 weeks ago, nobody would have said that. But the reason I would still take Steph, even though the Warriors have been losing this series, now down 3-2, is because of what he does for his team. On defense, he's not a great individual defender. He's not Kawhi Leonard, but he is a great team defender. He rarely has lapses mentally. He rarely makes mistakes that cost the team a possession on defense. He gets those steals because he plays good team concept defense. And on offense, he moves well without the ball. He rarely makes selfish plays. He's always willing to make the extra pass. He drives to the basket better than anybody other than like Kyrie Irving from the guard position. So to me, he does so many things that are better because Russ is the one-on-one player you want. He can be, when he's locked in, a great one-on-one defender, but he has had so many lapses on defense this postseason that he's just selfish defensively. He's selfish offensively. Now he's amazing. Me and you both have caped up for Russ a lot. We're big fans of his, but you have to still look at the Warriors and Steph and say, okay, this guy is the best player in the league. He deserves unanimous MVP. While I understand the argument that LeBron is more valuable to his team, I still have no problem with giving the award as it is to Steph. So anyways, all that to say, the narratives that are trying to be created by, in my mind, like ignorant basketball fans, and I don't want to say that sounding like I have it all figured out. It just, to me, it feels short-sighted. It feels like it's an overreaction. It feels like it's too soon because there's still a chance the Warriors come back. I mean, if they win this game on Saturday night, all of the pressure is on OKC. And by the way, all the pressure is on OKC right now because if you have to win that game Saturday night, or I'm not confident you're going to win the series.
Definitely. Talking about Russell Westbrook, I think I'm a little bit more high on his series than you are as far as on the defensive side and more so on the offensive side. I think until tonight, I thought he's had a really, really solid series as far as basically just not taking shots that Russell Westbrook takes and you think he's just gonna blow it and completely miss. There was one tonight where I was watching the game with my dad and I said, he had made like a few really solid jumpers in a row and he just took a crappy three, and I know his 3-point percentage for the series is still like, it's not good. He's 11 for 30. It's not good, but it's felt like his overall game as far as like the jumpers he's taking and the overall shots that he's making, it feels like he's being a little bit more under control and not as just completely crazy as he was before. I mean, as far as turnovers, I mean, he only has one more turnover than Steph does for the series, and I know Steph hasn't been himself, but if Steph has that many turnovers on a bad night and Russ on a good night has about the same, then I mean, I think Russ has had a pretty good series so far.
Yeah, and when I was talking about Russ, I don't mean to say that he hasn't had a good series. I think he's actually been better than Steph this series as far as he's been very focused defensively. He had so many lapses against the Spurs and the Mavericks, and I guess my point was more this series is more the exception all around than it is the rule. Like the way that Steph and Draymond and the Warriors have looked is the exception. I don't think it's actually the way that they are as a team. That's why I think it's so hard for people to say, to look at this and just make a judgment. And now you can't take anything away from the Thunder. I think the Thunder have been absolutely impressive. I think they've played as well as they can play this series. But I don't know. And that's why I think you can't just take this and say, see, the Warriors are not, they're frauds. Draymond isn't he's not anything special. And Steph, as soon as you take away his 3-pointer, he can't do anything else. But to me, that feels so short-sighted. And so I think I'm with you. I mean, Russ has had a phenomenal series. Offensively, he's been really smart. When he settles for threes, he makes the ones that count. Obviously, like you said, he's one of the weirdest players from three because he doesn't make them most of the time. He's a terrible three-point shooter for the amount that he takes. I know that a lot of people use that stat to talk about. I think he's like the third worst all time, but beyond that, he makes them when it counts, and he's been hitting his mid-range. He's been creating for others so well. This is the Russ that you and I have talked about being one of the best players in the NBA. And I think that's why we get so frustrated with him, is because when we see this version of him, we wonder why we're not seeing it all the time. So yeah, I totally agree with you. He's had a great series. And I don't mean to say that he hasn't had a great series up to this point. I just mean this series, the way he's playing right now, I want to see this all the time so that I can believe that it's actually him. And I think that's why I get frustrated by the everybody kind of, wanting to just say all of a sudden, well, see, Russ is better than Steph. Well, he is right now in this game, but in the next game, he might not be. So anyways, yeah, I think that's a good point about Russ.
What do you think the Thunder have to do differently from this game in order to win a game 6?
I really don't know, because it seemed like KD was hitting his shots when he needed to. I think, I don't really know what else they can do, because the Warriors adjusted their defense well. I was so glad that they stopped doing that. It didn't make sense to me from the beginning when I first heard people talking about it. But when Draymond was sagging off of Robertson the first few games, they were playing that style of defense. To me, that made absolutely no sense, because Draymond, and one of the things people talk about with him is you have to keep him engaged, keep him challenged on defense. And to me, that was taking away his greatest strength, which is his aggression and his relentlessness, if that's even a word. But to put him back in the mix of things, to have him out there, to me, that kind of changes things for the Thunder. They can't play Cantor, obviously. I mean, you need Ibaka to step up. They need somebody other than Russ and KD to step up at home. You need one of the role players to really step up and score some points. Morrow started hitting some shots tonight. So, I mean, if you see Morrow put up 15 Saturday night, I think that could be the difference in the series.
That statement has to make Oklahoma City fans feel absolutely awful, because he was like the only guy who did anything off the bench. I'm looking at the box score now. He had 10 points in 7 minutes. Dion Waiters played 26 minutes and had 0 points. His plus or minus was -18. So Waiters finally came back to planet Earth after playing really well in the first few games and had an absolutely awful game 5. So, I mean, that right there is like the killer, right? Is if you have a guy like Dion Waiters who you rely on for 26 minutes and doesn't even score a point, like that doesn't bode well for you. So you really hope that if you're an Oklahoma City fan, that he comes back and actually plays like a solid game, because he hasn't been getting to the hole really, really well. Like, he only took 1 3 this game. So you would hope that he would shoot a little bit more and try to get to the basket more, because his penetration has always been like really, really solid from him. But I really hope for Oklahoma City fans' sake that Anthony Morrow isn't what they're relying on for game 6. And I don't think it could necessarily come down to that. Like, obviously they're going to have to get a little bit more from, Randy Foye, and, maybe, a few more minutes from Enes Kanter. He only played 6 minutes tonight, and I get you can't really play him a ton more. But if the Warriors continue to go big, I mean, maybe you have to play him, because it felt like, and I don't have the specific numbers in front of me as far as points in the paint, but I'm pretty sure the Warriors straight up dominated as far as points in the paint. And that just doesn't seem like, if you're the Thunder, like, that can't happen. Like, you should be the bigger, you're the longer team. And even if the Warriors decide to play bigger with Mo Bates or something like that, I feel like you have to somewhat counteract that. Or I don't know, maybe you stay small, but it feels like they need to do something as far as they can't keep taking as many isolation jump shots as they did in this game. And if you think about it in your head, it feels like Russ hit a ton of them, which he did, but he was still 11 for 28 in this game, and Durant was 12 for 31. So obviously they were missing a ton, and they missed a decent amount of threes, but they also missed a decent amount of mid-range jumpers. And going down the stretch, that's felt like all it was, is that it was Durant penetrations with a fadeaway jumper, and of course, because he's Kevin Durant, he'll hit some of them, but it just wasn't a high quality possessions. And I feel like that's really all they have to change in order to come away with a game 6 win, because short of Steph all of a sudden finding a shot, which he could, and going crazy, if the Warriors play as well as they did in this game, which was really well, it still feels like if the Thunder just play more efficient offensive basketball, that they can come away with a win and not change anything too drastically, like, hoping that, Randy Foye or Anthony Morrow can hit, 5 threes in a game or something like that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, at some point, it really is about efficiency, but one thing that would be kind of alarming to me is that, I mean, it's for me watching as somebody who is kind of pulling for the Warriors, even though I'm not a fan. I think that just naturally is how I'm pulling right now. Whenever I see Dion Waiters drive, I get nervous because he's so good at attacking the basket and dishing it out. So for me, as somebody watching that and like what I should be afraid of as a Warriors fan, it still wasn't producing points for the Thunder as often as it should have, because he was creating open looks. I think they were getting as much as they could get from Ibaka. He hit 3 threes. He had almost 10 rebounds. He had 8 or 9. I think they were getting the most they could out of a lot of these guys. And at some point, like, okay, this is a good segue into the Billy Donovan conversation, because people are giving him all of this credit. And yes, I will say he's done a good job, but and maybe you can help me what I'm missing. What has he really done that was that profound? Like, to me, he hasn't made no adjustments to me that were not the obvious adjustments. Like, tightening his rotation was the obvious adjustment. Playing big against the Spurs was the obvious adjustment. Putting Ibaka at the 5 and Durant at the 4 was the obvious adjustment against the Warriors. And only playing one big man against the Warriors, except for sometimes they would throw in Ibaka. To me, that's the obvious thing that you do. And when your players are playing really well, yeah, that makes you look like a really good coach. So to me, I'm just watching this offense, and you just talked about it. What are they doing that they've done for the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years? ISO jumpers, ISO mid-range jumpers, ISO three-pointers, drive and dish, pick and roll, drive and dish. And while it works, and while it's worked so far, if the Warriors just figured something out in this game with Bogut, if playing big is going to work for the Warriors, I'm a little bit worried if I'm the Thunder. And we talked about, obviously, the Thunder didn't play their best game and they still had a chance to win. At the same time, they didn't win, and they played, anytime you have Russ and KD, even though they weren't very efficient, they made a lot of free throws, which goes into that takes away from their field goal percentage, but obviously adds to their point total. Both of them scored around 30. I don't know what else they have to do to win other than make some more shots that they missed. But they're not. The problem with that is they're not getting easy shots. They're getting heavily contested, double teamed sometimes, 15 to 20 footers. So to me, yeah, okay, maybe there's not a lot of adjustments that need to be made, but I don't really trust Billy Donovan to make them. And this is why in the article I wrote last week, I said one of my main rules and one of my main observations from this season was I don't trust the Thunder. I just do not trust them. I don't trust Billy Donovan, even though everyone's saying he's this great coach now. I don't think he's making crazy adjustments. I don't think he's doing anything spectacular on offense. I just don't trust that they're going to make the right decision when it comes down to it. Now, that doesn't mean they won't win the series based on just sheer talent. But, again, it just kind of comes down to I don't trust them. They could make – I don't know what adjustment they would make. They've kind of shown all their hand, and it's kind of they just need Russ and KD to go off to win.
Let me play a little bit of devil's advocate here with the Billy Donovan thing, because I don't necessarily completely disagree with you on all of that, but I think it is somewhat of a big deal to make those obvious adjustments, because KD at the 4, switching the lineups in order so that one of KD or Russ are always on the floor, playing big against the Spurs, playing a little bit smaller with Ibaka at the 5 against the Warriors. Like, all that stuff is, somewhat obvious for a few people, but like Scotty Brooks is like a pretty solid NBA coach, and none of those changes were made. And whether Donovan was just kind of messing around for the first half of the season or not, like, those changes weren't made then either. So it's like, yeah, like they, we can say they were obvious or whatever, but it obviously wasn't that obvious, because it wasn't, the unanimous solution. And obviously, it's easy to say, well, yes, it is, because look, it's, it's working now. But I think there's that. And then I also think there's like you say like the players are playing well, but like you have to give the coach credit to some extent, and maybe not as much for Katie and Russ, but I think you still have to give him some credit for that. But then especially the Dion Waiters and figuring out what to do with Andre Roberson, and Enes Kanter playing real, like he was a key player in the Spurs series, and Steven Adams taking it up another level. Like at some point you have to give the coach credit for the players improving in multitude of ways, because that's happened in these playoffs. Like the Thunder have increased in a lot of different ways, and yeah, like you may not trust him, and I don't necessarily trust him either, but this was a game in which the old Thunder felt like they would have folded, and in this game they didn't. Like they were still competing, they weren't getting stupid fouls, they weren't losing their temper. They're still the Thunder, and I'm kind of with you. I still don't trust him, but at the same time, I feel like I've lost a little bit of trust for the Warriors as well. And it's like, I still think Billy Donovan has, he's not amazing, but because, and I don't know how much control you can have over guys like Katie and Russ at the end of the game when they're saying, screw it, and they just go one-on-one. But I do feel like this game was a bit of a one-off, and overall, I do feel like the Thunder have figured something out that Billy Donovan has really instilled in the team that wasn't there before.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to argue with you because the results kind of speak for themselves. And I can't prove a negative, but I will say this is the first time the Thunder have been completely healthy in the postseason since the finals run. And I think this is the thing that everybody who wanted to argue for Scotty Brooks has made this argument. But to make that argument again, I think it's a valid one. If he had a perfectly healthy Thunder team right now, would he not be making the same moves that Billy Donovan would make? Or would it be easy for him to make those moves if his team was healthy? Just because if you think about it, obviously 2012, 2013, Russ gets injured in the first round against the Rockets. The next year is when Ibaka goes out and, they lose to the Spurs in 6 when really they had the talent to push the Spurs, and that was when the Spurs go on to win the title. So even that year they could have pushed the Spurs even more when the Spurs were the best team in the league by far. And then the next season, obviously last season, KD is out for the entire year pretty much. And to me, this is like kind of the first time they've been healthy since that finals run. And this is an old argument, but it's one that I feel like needs to be talked about because yes, Donovan, I think, has instilled some kind of mentality, or maybe they believe in Donovan, or the team believes in each other, or something just clicked in that Spurs series. I don't know what it was. It's kind of inexplicable right now. But it's hard for me to think that if Scott Brooks were in this situation, things will be any different. Because the team played really hard. I mean, they were a really good defensive team under Scotty Brooks. And now they're a really good defensive team again, because everybody's healthy and everybody's there. As much as they may have been the obvious, quote unquote, and maybe that's just because you and I like read and listen more and we're nerds about this stuff. So maybe it's obvious to us because of that. But he's made the right decisions. So I have to give him credit for making the right decisions, whether they're obvious or not. That's important. But I at some point, to me, it's kind of like, give him credit, but let's realize that this guy is not better than Pop. He's probably not better than Steve Kerr. He's proved himself to be a competent NBA head coach, and he's using his team, which is loaded, to the best of their ability. And so I can give him credit for that, but I just think it's a bit much to start giving him too much praise, because on offense, they're still not doing anything to get themselves easier shots. They're still just basically hoping and crossing their fingers at the end of the game that KD can hit a 30-footer, or that Russ can hit a layup running, 30 miles an hour towards the rim. So while I have to give him credit, I still think that there's something lacking that could cost them if the Warriors put it together in Game 6. So that's just my thoughts. I think I agree with you to an extent, but I can't give him all the credit, because you still watch fourth quarters with the Thunder, and it's really hard to trust them unless like even in that Game 5 against the Spurs. I know I'm long-winded here, but even that Game 5 against the Spurs, Russ hits these ridiculous 30-foot threes, and it's like if that's the offense you have to count on, while it worked in that game, like I would like something that's a little bit more measurable, a little bit more consistent than a Russ pull-up 30-footer against Kawhi Leonard. I don't know. It's hard to argue right now because all the results say the opposite of rational thinking. But to me, it's like he's still not getting easier shots for his team. He's just praying that Russ and KD can carry the offense. And so far they have.
So you don't have to straight up like give a prediction, but what do you think is going to happen in Game 6?
I am so torn because even in this conversation, you've probably heard it in the way I've argued both sides almost. There's something that almost tells me, okay, the Warriors might have just found something with this whole playing big. And to me, that's, I think, the difference in like a good coach where Steve Kerr versus Billy Donovan, where Billy Donovan's a good coach, but this adjustment by the Warriors is something an excellent coach can make, where you take Ezeli out because he hasn't been good. You put the decision-making in Bogut's hands. And if Bogut can do that again, it feels like the Warriors found something. And if Steph can stay aggressive and if Clay can have a similar game next game where he didn't shoot the best, but he still put up 27, 28, 29 points, I don't know. I think for me, because I have to stick to my rule of I've got to trust the Warriors and not the Thunder, my prediction is the Warriors win Game 6 and force Game 7. And I know that feels like kind of a cop-out, but at this point, I don't want to overreact, and I don't want to overreact, I guess, to the game we just watched. Part of me feels like this could be a 15-point victory, like I talked about for the Thunder, but I have to go on what I've seen all season, and even in this series, even in this game tonight, and I've got to pick the Warriors in what I think will be the best game of the series so far.
Saturday is just going to be one of the greatest days of my life. My sister graduates high school in the afternoon. The two Madrid sides battle for the UEFA Champions League trophy. And then at night, you got Game 6. And like you said, it could be one of the best postseason games in a long time, with the Warriors getting some newfound confidence and the Thunder seemingly not losing any of theirs, even though they lost this game. Like, they still feel confident. And so the overreaction discussion is a little bit difficult for me because in the past 9 games, my entire opinion on the Thunder has changed, and it hasn't just been 2 games. It's been like a consistent ever since really Game 2 of the Spurs series till now. My entire view of them has, it's changed in terms of how I feel that they can perform in situations in which they would have completely choked in the past. And so, yeah, like I get what you're saying, and I really liked the piece you wrote about, not overreacting to the Spurs series. And then the Thunder kicked the crap out of the Warriors in Game 3 and 4 and, beat them solidly in Game 1. And it's like, geez. So, for me, it would almost be, and this is just the way my mind works, and I love that we disagree on this, but for me, it seems like overreacting to say that the Warriors have figured something out that would make you think that they can beat the Thunder on their home court. Because I get the going big thing, like, it worked today, but is that really something big enough to where, the Thunder, beat them bad in Games 3 and 4. Is that something that they can, overcompensate and get a win, in Oklahoma City, which is, a really, great place to plan for the home side and the Thunder? And I just don't think it is. And maybe it's coming full circle with, the Durant and Westbrook thing or not. For me, it feels like they're going to win Game 6. And if they don't, frankly, it won't be a big surprise because it's a 73-win team. But if I, had to make a prediction, it would be that the Thunder would win Game 6 because it feels like a culmination of Russ and KD going back to the finals. And for whatever reason, that feels more right than the Warriors. And that's really, I don't think a lot of people would say that because the Warriors won 73 games.
First off, mazel tov to your sister graduating high school. That's awesome. Congratulations. But no, I'm actually really happy that we disagree because we almost never disagree on anything. But yeah, I think what you're saying is fair about the overreaction thing. And I was thinking about it as I was talking about it. It does sound like an overreaction on my part to say, okay, the Warriors won this game and this was working, so they'll win the next game. Because to me, this year it's become abundantly clear, and it's something that I almost don't let myself, and this is what I've been kind of thinking about all postseason, is I need to think about the way I think about a playoff basketball, because I think in my mind I was letting momentum or a win inform the next game. And momentum doesn't exist in the NBA playoffs. I mean, it quite frankly just doesn't exist. Like the Raptors-Cavs game is the perfect example that the Cavs destroyed the Raptors the first two games. And then the very next game, obviously the Raptors win. And then once again, the Raptors win. But the game 4 to me was the perfect example of this in the Eastern Conference Finals, because the Raptors are up big. The Cavs come storming back. It looks like the Cavs are about to run away with the game. And then all of a sudden the Raptors shut the door. Like momentum. And if you believe in momentum, then you believe that the Cavs would have won that game because of the way that they came back. They had all of the quote-unquote momentum, but the Raptors slammed the door because they were more confident, and they executed better down the stretch. And so I think that that's the way the NBA playoffs work. You win a game, you could win by 30. Obviously, the Warriors won Game 2 by 30. Game 3 and 4, the Thunder win by 30. Game 5, the Warriors win by 10, 9, or whatever it was. So to me, there's no such thing as momentum. Just because you win a game by 30, you don't win the next one by the same amount. It doesn't necessarily mean it'll carry over. Obviously, in the Thunder's case, it did carry over. But every game, I guess the point of that is every game is its own thing. And I think that that's why I'm confident in the Warriors, is that I've seen them do it, and I've yet to see the Thunder do it. I've yet to see the Thunder slam the door on a team that is better than them, because I believe that when they're playing at their best, the Warriors are still better than the Thunder. Now, you may disagree with me on that, and it sounds like you probably do as far as the way the Thunder are playing right now. I think when the Warriors are playing as they have played all season, they're a better team. And so to me, I have to go with the team I trust, the team that I just watched. And it's not just a reaction to the fact that they won, because a win is a win, whatever. But to me, it's that they scrapped their original game plan and that they put something else together that if Draymond gets a little bit closer to getting over that hump, that's that mental block, and if Steph gets a little bit more aggressive, or if he finds his shot, because we still have not, I mean, this is another thing to think about. We still have yet to have the Steph game. We've yet to have the game where I guess he did it. He had that 2-minute stretch in Game 2 where he went off, but we haven't had the game where he goes for like 40, 50, whatever, and just kind of is insane the entire game. So I'm thinking that if we have that in Game 6, if this game plan thing is real, and if Draymond gets over this hump, then, I'll be justified for saying this. But I'm glad we disagree, because we hardly ever disagree. So, I mean, what do you see in the Thunder that gives you this confidence for them to win the next game?
I think the main thing is, and it's pretty simple, is you talked about you have yet to see the Thunder beat a team that's better than them. Many would argue the Spurs were, just because of the regular season count, but I kind of disagree with the way that, I guess it's pretty easy to disagree and say that the Thunder were better than the Spurs because they beat them, and I do agree with you that the Warriors at their best are better than the Thunder. And you say if they play like they have all season, and that's great. I just don't think they are the team that they have been all season, because when you have your two best players in Draymond and Steph, and for all that Steph accomplished tonight, it still feels like he's in a bit of a hump, because like you said, we haven't had the Steph goes off game. But when you have your two best players in an offensive slump to where they aren't performing the way they do during the regular season, that gives me confidence that the other team has a real shot. And when the other team has Durant and Westbrook, who, didn't play well in Game 5, but are playing some of the best basketball of their careers, I think that's really the main thing that gives me confidence, if anything. So
that's fair. Let me ask you a question then. How long? Because if you think about it, the Portland series, Steph was out for. Well, how many games? I don't know how many games he missed with that knee issue against the Rockets. But so Steph's out, and your offense is running through Draymond, and things are just running a little bit differently. And you're depending on Clay and Draymond to get things going. And then Steph comes back. I mean, how many games in your mind does it take for the Warriors to get back to peak Warrior form? where they're just getting back into, because if you think about in the regular season, you lose a player, there's kind of some forgiveness as far as you play so many games that it's just quick. It's easy to get back into a rhythm. Do you think that part of this could be the Warriors just getting back into a rhythm because they're getting used to playing with everybody there? Because, that Portland series, you're playing a lot of minutes without your team, and every minute in the playoffs feels like twice as long than the regular season. I mean, do you feel like there's some carryover there of the team trying to figure out how to play all together again, and then maybe, just maybe, they're about to figure it out?
To some extent, but I feel like, yeah, he had a couple weeks to where he wasn't really playing, but this is their sixth. I'm pretty sure he came back in game 5 when they closed it. It might have even been game 4 in the Portland series, but for argument's sake, let's just say game 5. And so, I mean, you have game 5.
He came back game 4 because that was the overtime 17 points thing.
Okay, that's right. So he's had, in that case, this is the 7th game where he's been back. So, I mean, I don't know. Like, if you can't get it together by that point, then, and maybe tonight is the night they got it together. I don't know. It didn't look like it to me, but maybe they fully got it together again. And if you can't really get it together that fast, then, maybe there is a deeper problem as far as stamina or injury, or you're just playing a team that's really long and it's eliminating your bread and butter pick and roll. And that's breaking down some of the other things that, in the previous time has been your second or third option, and now it's being forced up to your first option, and that's exposing you a little bit. Like, I'm not really sure, and I can't really say for certainty whether or not they are back to where they are, but it feels like they should have been back to where they are already if they are going to this year.
Yeah, so do you think did the last 3 or 4 minutes of that last game tonight show you anything about, like, in your mind, is that, because I mean, with Steph, it kind of felt like, I think Bill Simmons tweeted about it, like, when do we have the how secretly injured is Steph conversation? Did tonight show you Steph isn't injured the last 4 minutes, or did it show you maybe Steph has found his confidence again? Like, did that show you anything that gives you any worry for the next game if you're a Thunder fan? Not
really, because I was kind of the belief that, like, crap, like, he must be hurt. And then a couple people made the point, like, I mean, he is guarding Russell Westbrook, and, like, Westbrook's a freak, so we didn't really think of the effect on him, but, like, maybe it is affecting Curry, and then, like, the length's affecting his shot. So, I mean, maybe he isn't really that hurt. I mean, maybe he's just a little bit uncomfortable, and his shot's not going in, and the culmination of those two things make it look like he's way not the guy he is. But tonight wouldn't really do anything to scare me because his shot still wasn't on. Clay was pretty good, but his shot wasn't anything like it was even in game 4. So, I mean, obviously, like, I'm not a Thunder fan, so I can't really say, because if my team was playing against the Warriors, I would live in a constant fear of Steph Curry unless he went for like an entire season without playing, like Steph Curry. So, I mean, the fact that it's only been, a round and a half since he's been, even less than that, because he did it partially in the Portland series too. So it's like, I'd still be scared of Steph Curry, even if he hadn't did what he did tonight and, playing well. He didn't play great, but, like, he still played well. So even if he had played awful tonight, like, I'd still be freaked out if that dude was coming into my building in game 6 and we basically had to win to not feel an incredible amount of pressure. Like, that would still scare the crap out of me regardless of how he was in form or not.
Yeah, I disagree with you a little bit, just because I think those last 3 minutes, I saw something in him I hadn't seen all series, and that was he attacked the rim with so much confidence and so much aggression. He hadn't done that. Like, even when he was attacking the rim in games 3 and 4, even before that, I felt like, even the game 2 when he went off, it always seemed like he was hesitant, or like he just, like, wasn't confident at all. But those last 3 minutes, it was like he just said, screw it. I'm going to go to the rim. If I get fouled, if I get blocked, or if I make it, I don't care. I'm going to go and I'm going to get to the rim. I don't think I had seen that from him yet. That's one thing that makes me concerned, because if I'm the Thunder, I want him to keep trying to shoot over 7-footers out there and settle, because he gets into a rhythm sometimes when he attacks the rim, gets a layup, and then the next time down the floor after a turnover or something, he gets a 3. Now all of a sudden he's in Steph mode, and he goes for one of those 10 straight point things. And I think I saw that the last 3 minutes where he was deciding I'm going to attack the rim. And if he decides to do that next game and does it with confidence, that's the thing I'm most worried about if I'm a Thunder fan, because he was so hesitant. If he's playing from outside in, which he does occasionally, and it works in the regular season, but in the postseason when he plays inside out, that's what I would be afraid of. And I think that if he continues to do that, that's how the Thunder will lose. And then I think even with the Clay thing, I'm just waiting, and if it doesn't happen, then I'm wrong. But it seems to me like at some point the law of averages says Clay and Steph, and this is, it goes against the mentality and confidence thing that is real about basketball. If you don't have the confidence, and if you feel uncomfortable because somebody is more athletic than you or taller than you, maybe you're going to miss more threes. But it feels like we're due for the Clay, Steph, 15 combined three-pointer game. And if that happens, obviously it's over. I mean, that's 45 points off threes if that's the case. But, those are the things that make me wonder, like, if the Warriors put those things together, and that's a big if, because the Thunder have obviously played great defense. But if they put it together in Game 6, like that scares me to no end if I'm the Thunder. But, I understand what you're saying, though, like, because to this point, the Warriors haven't done it. And to this point, like, Steph still hasn't looked like himself from three. But there were some signs to me that towards the end of that game that he was putting it together.
If I'm a Thunder fan, like, it's going to be a couple of restless nights before Game 6, because the fear of both of those guys, and Draymond doesn't really scare me as much because he can't do the, go off for like 12 threes by himself kind of thing. But like you said, the looming Steph and Clay game, like, it could happen. Maybe it won't because of the length. And like you said, it is a big if it could, but it's really scary. And I think that's a good note to leave it on, because no matter how you want to look at it as far as diving into how they're playing offensively or how Draymond's playing in the slump they're in defensively or whatever it may be, like, you still have two of the best shooters of all time and the best shooter of all time who could straight up go off and ruin your entire your series hope. So I don't really have anything else. Do you have anything else?
I was going to ask you two questions, but maybe I'll just ask you one. After this season, now that it's complete, are you willing to make Steph one of the top 25 players of all time? Come on.
From what I remember, we had that conversation at the midway point of the season, and I'd have to look at my list again, and because it's still hard for me to kick out some of those guys that had 13-year-long careers. But he's doing it for 2 full seasons and the unanimous MVP and winning 73 games, and even if they don't win the title, like, I'm definitely more inclined to put him there than I was before. So yeah.
Okay, all right. I can accept that. I think we might need to give that another crack during the summer. I think we might need to take another stab at it. I think that we've both matured over the course of the season. I think we might need to give it another try.
I agree with you, and I think the internet is getting tired because your connection's kind of winning out, and I'm getting tired as well. So we'll call it a wrap there. We will talk to you guys soon. We have some pieces coming out in the near future, so enjoy. Really, really try hard to enjoy the Cavs game and anticipate the Champions League final and Game 6 of the Warriors Thunder. And check us out at unprofession.com on all the social media sites, and be sure to subscribe on iTunes or SoundCloud. And Nathan, I'm glad we could do this.
And take care.
Awesome. Bye.